Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. It's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this is the Wednesday video where I answer your questions. Got some pretty great questions. I got a ton of stuff to show. This is going to be a pretty awesome show in terms of some big books that I'm going to show. Let's get right into it, though. First question comes from Adrift, who wrote, "Do you collect all sorts of risque and gruesome comics? I can certainly appreciate many of these from an artistic and historical perspective, but are there any legal comics that cross the line and that you simply wouldn't have or won't have in your collection or in your home?" I don't know. Maybe I'm just the type of person I am. I really don't feel that way. Like, it's more of lack of interest than just sheer, like, this is just too much. Now, there are comics that I do put away in my collection where, I don't want my kids seeing them because they're just not appropriate for kids, even though my kids are older. I just don't want them to think that their dad's too much of a perv. They might come across that way. But, there's, for the most part, I'm pretty open to whatever comics. I'm just not interested in. It's not, like, oh, I'm shocked I can't have that in my collection. It's more, I'm just not really interested. For example, like wrestling. I'm not a big wrestling fan, and so wrestling books don't have any interest in. I know lots of people that are into that genre and collect comics related to wrestling. Not interested. Just not my thing. So I don't have them. Like, I think of books like Crossed that actually do cross the line and are really extreme, but I have those in my collection. Another one that's a really obscure title and actually is considered technically illegal in Canada is Bondage Fairies. I have them in my collection. So they're pretty obscure, but there's things like that I guess would cross a line, but I actually collect them. So maybe I'm kind of weird that way. So hard to say. So one of those weird questions. Next question comes from K Munin. Thanks again as always, for answering my questions. Since dollar bins came up in this video, what are your best dollar bin finds? Have you ever paid top dollar for a comic only to find it in a dollar bin later? Yes. Actually, there's two books that were kind of like that, and I'm going to show you one of them. Actually, I kind of buried it. Why did I do that? That was really dumb. Okay, so I was really getting into Soti books, which is the Seduction of the Innocent. And what I was doing is I was trying to get the complete collection of Seduction of the Innocent related books that were mentioned in the Seduction of the Innocent, and that book, if you're familiar with it, was written by Frederick Wortham, who basically was demonizing comic books. And he wrote a book called The Seduction of the Innocent, and it had like about 155 books that it kind of referenced as evidence to how comics are corrupting the minds of youth. So I really liked to collect those books and get them all. And Wortham was not a guy that just published this one book. He actually was a guy that was in the public eye. He was one of those instigators or activists that was just there and pissing off all the different comic publishers. So he was a known agent within the comic book space. And the comic book companies actually responded to him. They were like, hey, we're not the bad guys here. We're we're putting out good content. Don't make us look bad. And one of those kind of things where they put it out there that they were like, upset with Wortham, he actually mentioned in The Seduction of the Innocent. And that was, to me, a grail. That was a grail book. I really wanted to have that specific comic in my collection. So it came up on Heritage. And it was actually the highest graded copy of that book. And it was one that features Frederick Wortham on the cover. So it's the first cover appearance of Frederick Wortham. And it was actually addressed to him. The cover was addressed to him, saying that, hey, Wortham, we're not the bad guys. And it's a really cool book. I'm going to show it. And it was not only was it that cool book. It was the highest grade copy of it. There's only 7 on the census. And it was the highest grade copy, and it was a pedigree. So just, you're going to pay top dollar. It was an expensive book. So I bought that book. Then later, not in a dollar bin quite, there was an auction on eBay for a really low grade copy. It wasn't, a high grade copy, but it was a low grade copy. Even the low grade copies go for about $300 US. And nobody bid on it. The guy, when he wrote the listing, he didn't write it very well. It just, nobody bid on it. I put a bid on it just for the sake. Why not? And I won it. I won this this major book for cheap. And I was like, oh, now I have 2 copies, the highest graded copy, maybe the lowest graded copy. And it was kind of an interesting thing. So I'm going to show you the big book, the expensive one. I actually used the other one to trade and get some pretty big books. So it kind of worked out, actually. And I love having the highest graded copy. So this is it. Detective Comics number 9. Crime Detective Comics number 9, I should say. It's a white pager, and it was from the Hillman Periodicals collection. And there is Frederick Wortham. He was a psychologist. So they have him in the gear that, a psychologist would wear. And they have him bound and gagged, which is great. And then there's a little note here to Frederick Wortham. Just a cool book. I was really excited to get this. And I did pick it up. Again, not in a dollar bin, but almost for nothing in a bid. I think it was $9 total that I paid. The other one. This was not $9 total. The other one was $9 total. So yeah, it does happen. Okay. Now some other dollar bin finds that I had. One was with Matt. Matt and I were hanging out, and actually there was a book, really rare book. I actually could find it online, and I was like debating about buying it online. It was about $700. It was like some fairly expensive, and I was like, it's like, should I buy it? It's like so expensive, but I really wanted it. And then I was like just dollar bin diving with Matt from Matt Likes Comics, and I was just going through, and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's in here. It's literally there, and it wasn't $1, but it was mixed in like with anywhere from dollar bin to the highest price was $20 in this bin. And this was the $20 book. So it was a $20 book, but it's, even like the one I was looking at that was $700 was like really low grade, actually. So it's this book. It's Casper the Frightened Ghost. The Friendly Ghost, Frightened Ghost. He looks frightened. So yeah, the Friendly Ghost I think it's 20, number 20, yes. And this is actually the first appearance of Wendy, the Good Witch. And I like the character. I was a real big fan. I was like when I was really young, I didn't have any friends, and I could really relate to Casper. He was a good guy, but nobody appreciated him. Always people were scared of him, and he just wanted a friend. I felt the same way as a kid. So this was Casper number 20, and it features Wendy the Good Witch. Just a great book, and I found it kind of in the dollar bin. I was super excited to get that. Now, a bigger book for that I paid much less for, and I kind of goofed on it. I feel bad about this, but part of the thing with me, and if you watch this channel for any length of time, you'll realize this about me, is you'll see that I say, oh, I have that, or I'm not very controlled in my what I'm thinking. You can tell what I'm thinking. You know who I am if you just watch these videos. You know who I am. I pretty much put it out there. And when I discover something, I can't control myself sometimes, and I just get excited. And so have that in mind when I tell you this next story. So there was a guy, and he was selling digests. And I was looking for a digest, and for 2 years, 3 years, there was a specific digest that I was looking for. Very rare digest, very expensive if you can find it. That just happens to have the very first appearance of Scooby-Doo. So it's a digest book with the first appearance of Scooby-Doo. And I was like looking everywhere for it. I saw this guy with a whole bunch of digests, and he just happened to have the right series of digests. So it's in a specific series of digests. And I was like, no, there couldn't be. It couldn't be in this pile. There would be no way that that would be a possibility. I'm not that lucky. Well, I am that lucky because I was going through, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's there. Now, I almost felt like negotiating the price because that's the kind of person I am. But it was like $5. It was like $5 Canadian, which is practically nothing, almost dollar bin level US dollars. And he had it for $5. Mint condition. Mint. It's like really, really nice copy. And so I paid $5 for it, and here it is. But after I paid the $5 and had it in my hands, and it's mine now, I was like, do you know what this is? Do you know what this is? I was like so excited to tell him what it is, because he didn't know. Obviously, he did not know. He was a dealer. He was a dealer in digests, which is the craziest part of it. But he didn't know the significance of this book. This is the first appearance of Scooby-Doo. Now, I'm actually going to show it to you guys because, it's a really cool first appearance. I was super excited. I even showed him. I was like so excited to get this book, which is not a good thing to do. He just got ripped off basically. I just paid like a fraction of what it's worth. And here's the first appearance of Scooby-Doo right there. And he's not the Scooby-Doo that we recognize, but this actually came out before the cartoon series did, and before the comic. I guess they were still prototyping the dog a bit. It says Scooby-Doo on it. Shows him, it looks like Scooby-Doo. He's just the wrong color. He's white instead of the brown that we know him as. But it's the first appearance of Scooby-Doo. And just a cool find. Really hard book to find. It's Golden Comics Digest. I believe number 7, if I'm correct. I think I'm correct. And just a really, really hard one to find. And I was super excited to get it. I couldn't control myself, and I told him like, oh, you know what you just sold me. I kind of made the guy feel a little bad, so I feel bad about doing that. But I was just too excited. I couldn't control my exuberance. So yeah, a bit of a goof on that one, but it was a cool find. So those are some of my dollar bin finds. I hope you enjoyed those. Next question comes from Erica Casagrande, or Eric Casagrande, sorry. You mentioned in the previous comic ages, platinum, gold, silver, bronze, copper. If possible, could you give dates to each of these ages? I can give you my dates, which is, it's one of those things where it's a little bit subjective. There are like debates about which ages kind of happen when, but for the most part, certain ages are kind of known. I'll get into each, okay? So platinum, easiest way to think of it is pre 1938. And post. Now, there are people that kind of have two other ages that happened in the 20th century, which would be Victorian, which kind of ended, and then Edwardian. So these are like based on kings and queens. That kind of was like, there was a kind of a mini age there. And then it would be the platinum age. So the platinum age is like early like 20s to 1938. So that kind of time frame. It's basically more irregular sized books, and early comics were in that kind of end of that age. So that ended with the first appearance of Superman, which is 1938, with Action Comics 1. So Action Comics 1 marks the beginning of the Golden Age. And the Golden Age ran all the way up to 1954, kind of 55, March of 55 is when the Comic Code Authority stamp first started appearing. So I actually take it all the way up to that first book with the stamp on it. So once that Comic Code Authority stamp appears on the comic, boom, the age of the golden is gone, the Golden Age. So basically from 1938 to 1955, early 1955. Now, that age marks the end of the Golden Age, start of the Silver Age. Now, the Silver Age is kind of a weird age as well. So we're starting with 1955 all the way up to 1969 is the end of the Golden Age, end of the Silver Age. And the Silver Age end was kind of marked by books that kind of were a little bit fighting against the code at that point, where they were kind of rebelling against the code. They were doing, more horror, more drug-related issues, things that were kind of going against what the Comic Code Authority would allow them to do. So it's the weakening of the code, and that started the Bronze Age. So 1970, and some people take it all the way up to 1984, is the Bronze Age. I sort of like to always take it as decades or as close to decades as possible. So I sometimes cut it off at 1980, but usually the cutoff is 1984. And I believe the reason for that is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles coming out and basically starting what's considered to be the Copper Age of comics, where you get independent comics really kind of driving the comic book marketplace. So 1984 all the way up to actually some people say Copper Age is the age that we're currently in, all the way up till now. But the Copper Age really, I feel, stops at 1991-ish, where you have the emergence of X-Men 1, Death of Superman, all these kind of plastic age comics. So I take that from 1991 all the way up to 2000. And then I mark the 2000 era from 2000 to 2018, maybe 2022 even. All the way up to 2022 as the digital age. So that's the age of the internet rising and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of period, which is kind of considered to be the modern age. These are me creating new ages, plastic age and digital age. Then we have, in the last 2 years, from 2022 till now, and going forward a bit, the AI age. And then our robot overlords will take us and kill us, probably, or put us into capsules, and then we'll be in the virtual reality age. I'm not sure what's going to happen. But, that's future ages. Those are the big ages really are platinum, gold, silver, bronze, copper. So those are the big, more established ages, and I sort of gave you the time frames for each. I hope that me going on with the plastic and all those don't cause too much confusion. Okay, next question comes from Matt Likes Comics. What was your first reaction when you heard they were going to kill off Superman? Well, actually I brought my copy of The Death of Superman. So this is The Death of Superman, Superman number 75. Nice little, I like this image. It's actually a very iconic image. This is a newsstand copy, actually, 9.8. Actually got it for cheap. This was another lucky find on Heritage. Nobody bid on it, and I just picked it up for really cheap. So the Death of Superman, when I heard about it, I had sort of two feelings about it. At that time, Superman was kind of sputtering, and it wasn't really performing as well as some of these other books. Like, independent comics were kind of dominating. There was sort of fresh ideas being injected, even though a lot of the stories were actually ripoffs of the other other universes, but it was at least something new was happening. And they were actually, like, if you look at Malibu Comics and Image, they were doing stuff that was maybe just rehashing of old ideas, but they were doing it with some new artists, new talent, new styles. And that really was killing the mega superheroes of DC and Marvel. And Superman was kind of, as I said, it was just floundering. It was not really doing that well. And I know why they did. And I actually had all this in my mind that, oh, I can see why they're doing this. It's to drum up excitement about their comics again. And how do you drum up excitement? Well, you kill off your hero. And if you read enough comics, or if you experience enough time period in comics, you realize that characters die and then they come back. So I thought, okay, they're going to kill him off, but how long is it going to take for them to bring him back? He's not dead and gone. He'll come back. So, and that was exactly what happened, right? But it was interesting. It was very, I actually was very enthusiastic about the fact that they were doing it, because I saw it as something that re-energized the whole classic characters, like of Superman, Batman, all these characters. So I actually was pretty excited about it, just the buzz. Back in the 90s, when Death of Superman was kind of announced, that they were going to do this, there was a lot of excitement. It was like the pinnacle of collecting. It was just like the big thing that everyone was excited about. And that was a really cool thing. And it was cool. It's like one of those water cooler moments where you get everyone sort of just chatting about it, right? And like excited. Oh, what's this gonna do? What's gonna happen? It was really exciting. That was my feeling. I didn't have like, oh, he's dead. Oh, I'm so sad. Not that at all. It was the other way. It was like excitement about the possibilities, about what are they going to do with this? How are they going to kill him off? How is this going to play out? It's a big deal. So that was more my feelings about it. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Be curious how you felt about it as well, because I know you're a big action and Legion fan, and you like the DC characters as much as I do. Okay, Stepify, or Steppo, or Stephen Gentner, or Collecto6 wrote, I keep hearing about the extra desirability of books with little cover details near the edges or corners, or edges of their covers. Something like a comma, or something about a comma on TOS 39. How many big books have you discovered with extra goodness or desirability from superior cover wraps? Okay, so there's a bunch that I can think of that are not just cover wrap issues, because like those do come into play, especially more in the golden age than more the modern. But you'd get ones where there's printing errors and stuff like that in the modern age. I can think of one of the Amazing Spider-Mans is like that, where it's reversed. There's also one with the one of the Batman ones with the Todd McFarlane one, where the color is not done right. But I'm thinking more about little defects or changes that happen with covers. So some of the ones that you would be familiar with would be Batman 1. Your copy, Steven's copy of Batman 1, has the dot. Or is it the no dot? Actually, it's the no dot. And then later on, they added a dot next to the 1. So that it's Batman dot 1. The first, when they were running it, they decided, hey, looks kind of weird without the dot. So they added in the dot. But the first ones that were printed didn't have that dot. So that's one example. Another example is Marvel Comics #1. This is not really a printing error or like printing change. but more of a reprint issue. So what happened was Marvel Comics 1 was the first reprint. There's actually an October variant, and there's a November variant of Marvel Comics 1. And that's really the first reprint. They actually, when you buy Marvel 1, there is a bit of a boost that you get for having that October one, but it's not as much as you would think, because it's, it is one of those reprint situations, but it's not treated like both are very expensive books, despite one being actually a reprint and the other being the first print. It's just seen as the October and the November variants, which is not really the case. It's actually a reprint. So it's interesting how that worked, but that is an example of one. Another one that's kind of not really about the cover, but more internally, would be Superman 1, that also had multiple reprints, and it's about which ads are inside the book. So that's one of those ones where it's all merged together, even though, and they're all treated like, even though like one is, these are literally reprints, they're actually treated with the same value, even with the Superman 1. I've never seen it on the census where it's distinguished, like this copy is one with this ad, and this copy is one with this ad, making it the second or reprint. It's weird how that is, but it is that way. But there's other ones that I can show you. And one is this one, Startling Terror Tales, where this is the variant, or the reprint, and weird, not really a reprint, but what happened was when they first tried to print this book, they had a black border around this terror, which makes sense, because if it's yellow and black, the yellow will really pop with the dark black border. However, they didn't think about the fact that it's Startling Terror Tales, and you can see the tails right there. They didn't think that if you put a black border around a black text, well, you can't read it. So the first printings, the earliest printings on the run, had it black on black. They quickly realized that when they printed it, it was invisible. So they quickly altered the border and made it like this grayish color. So that's another variant where the black on black goes for a little bit more, not much actually, a little bit more than if it was just this variant. Both are expensive though. Now another one that I can think of that like you might not have thought of, but it's kind of an obvious one, is Amazing Fantasy. Now this is kind of an issue with this book, where the way that they produced the book created what's called Marvel chipping, and it's just the way that the kind of crappy way that they produced it. They just didn't produce it in the best way, and what you'll get is pieces like this kind of chipping off. Now some books have a lot of that, some books don't. They actually don't really dock it much in terms of the grade for their chipping, because it's a known defect with Amazing Fantasy 15. But, collectors want less Marvel chipping. So it's one of those things where collectors will look for books with, less Marvel chipping. The more Marvel chipping, the less value it gets, right? Even though the grade might suggest otherwise. So Marvel chipping is definitely something that is an interesting one, that people will look for those little subtleties in the cover. Less Marvel chipping, more value. Okay, the next one is the one you mentioned, Tales of Suspense 39. And the way it's not a comma that's the issue, it's a quotation. So you got Iron Man right here, and if the printing was just a little bit over, so you'd have like, see, I have double quotes on this side. On this side, it's a single quote. On the better presenting copies, it'll have double quotes on both sides. Another thing is you'll get a little bit more of the table at the bottom here. So on some, it'll actually be, this will be just flush, and there won't be this extra little blue underneath. So this one has the better bottom, but doesn't have the extra quote, or the extra part of the quote. So that is something collectors will look for, and they'll give it a little bit more of a value for that extra better presenting cover. Another one that I don't have, but is desired, is Chamber of Chills. So Chamber of Chills, if you look at it, the cigarette, now there could be the little cigarette bud, the cigarette, I always forget I'm not a smoker, so you can tell, where it has the little ember, the flame at the end. That, if you see that extra redness at the end, that goes for a little bit more money. And one that you recently picked up, Stephen, I'm pointing to you, was Captain America 1 from 1940. That book has some interesting features that, again, it's all about the placement of the way that they cut the cover. If you look at the bottom, Bucky, there's Bucky that's on the cover, and you see Captain America punching Hitler, but you see Bucky as well. If you can see the tops of Bucky's buttons, like he has kind of one of those button tops, you can see the tops of his buttons. Well, that's a better presenting one. And there's also a bullet that's bouncing off of Captain America's shield. And if you can see the bullet kind of bouncing off, some will cut it where the bullet is and you won't see the full bullet. Well, those are less valuable than the ones that have the full bullet. So generally the best presenting ones have both the bullet and the buttons. So that's things that people look for. This little details commands a little bit more, it's still an expensive book by itself. So there's not really that much difference in price, but a little bit. It's something collectors and people that have too much time on their hands will notice about the books and just oh, I have to have it with that extra little feature. So yeah, those are some of the ones that I can think of. There's a lot of modern ones that are like that, where there's little defects or color printing errors and stuff like that people kind of gravitate to. But these are some of the ones from the Golden Age. Okay. Next question comes from Deadman. Do you collect new comic book runs as opposed to just picking up keys when they happen? If you collect new runs, what are they? And if so, do you read them on a regular basis? Okay, so there was a few runs that I did pick up, just some ones that I was interested in, that I did read. They would be Tarot, which I pick up still, and the last issue was 144, and I do read those actually. I enjoy them. There's not really much to them, but they're fun. And then there was Something is Killing the Children. I read up to issue 10, and then I got kind of bored with it. It's sort of just the way it was. Then I also kind of kept up with all the Stray Dogs. I read all those, and Feral. So I got those as they came out. 8 Billion Genies was another run that I got the whole series and enjoyed it. Got it as it came out. Another one was Nice House on the Lake. I really enjoyed that, and read those. So those are ones that I would get just because they're actually good stories. But in terms of other modern books, generally I'll just sort of gravitate to the keys or the good covers. So for me, I'll buy the kind of more sexy covers, or the covers that have some good girl kind of elements to them. I will kind of focus on those. And I will also buy ones that, oh, hey, it's some new character being introduced, and I'll pick up those. But there were a few in the past that I have collected based on just good story, and I'll read them. Still, I'll read them online. I'm weird that way. Sometimes I open them up, but usually I'll read it online. I'm just weird. I just like having the book being perfect. I don't know why. So yeah, so that's that one. Next question comes from BGCB. Um, I don't get this question, so I'm going to answer it the wrong way because I know I'm answering it the wrong way, but I'm going to answer it anyways, but it's probably the wrong way. But it's a confusing question, so not my fault. Not my fault. Okay. ASM 1.8 Universal. What is a good Canadian price? Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple things about this. So ASM 1.8 is the grade 1.8, but what issue of ASM? Like there's like 1,000 issues of ASM. So I don't really know. And do you mean when you're saying Canadian price, do you mean like US dollars but just converted into Canadian? So I don't know. It's like a little bit confusing. But I'm going to answer something that kind of was a question that somebody else asked a few months ago. They asked me, how did Canadian price variance compare to other variants in terms of price correction after the COVID slump or the correction of the COVID era? So I'm going to basically say Universal 1.8, you got to tell me what issue and I can tell you the value. Best way to find that out is either go collect or GPA analysis, or look at sold items on eBay. So use those three methods. You'll probably get a good answer for yourself. But I'm going to just quickly answer about the Canadian price variant thing. From what I saw, the Canadian price variance actually outperformed the other books that were sort of hit by the COVID correction. And there was a couple things that kind of were in like why that was the case. Canadian price variants are usually 1/10 as common as the US price variant. And because of that, you just don't have as many sales. So one of the things that happened during COVID was things would sell, and that would create a trend. And you get these big spikes as a result because they would just kind of keep on selling and going up every time that they sold. They flip until the price was crazy. But the Canadian price variants are rarer, so they sold not as nearly as much, and they didn't have that big of a spike comparative to their US counterparts. So they kind of held their own a bit better. The same goes with the Mark Jewelers, if you're interested in those as well. Same thing, where they kind of held their value a little bit better, but they just didn't see the jump that the US variant had. Now, in general, US versus Canadian price variance, the Canadian price variants are worth about 2 times. So independent of grade, and there's a caveat to that. If you have a Canadian price variant versus the US, the Canadian price variant is worth about 2 times as much, depending on the grade, except for 9.8. If it's in a 9.8, it goes for about 3 times the value of US price variant. So in the very pinnacle, the highest grade, that's when you see the greatest difference in the US versus Canadian price variant, where it goes for about 3 times the value. So just something to be aware of. Okay, hopefully somewhere in there was an answer to your question, but I wasn't sure about your question, so bear with me on that one. Okay, a hammy? I'm not sure. I think it's a hammy. It's AHAMMY, a hammy? I don't know. Probably I'm like, it's probably like something where I have to space it out. Maybe I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I brutalize people's names all the time. Have you ever used undo stuff to remove a sticker from a comic? I've seen a presser use it, so it may be worth it for your bone issues. Never used it myself. Okay, so I never used it personally, but sometimes, and this is the thing that you got to kind of understand with stickers that get put onto comics, it's not the actual removal of the sticker that's the problem. And that's kind of like a misunderstanding, because there's lots of ways to remove the sticker for the most part. You can heat it, you can do things that actually just loosen the adhesive and the sticker will fall off. That's not really the problem. The problem is the adhesive itself. So what ends up happening is when you put a sticker onto a comic, the adhesive itself will either color alter the comic, like it'll actually like eat at the color in the comic cover. So that is the problem. It's more of that than actually the sticker being on it. So generally what happens is you get this kind of, not residue, but you get this kind of faded look under where the sticker was. And that was the problem with my bones, where my bone copies had that kind of like faded look where the sticker was, just at that one spot. So that's what killed the grade. So really annoying. Don't put stickers on comics, kids. Okay, last question comes from Troy Evans. And do you think the Golden Age market how do you think the Golden Age market has performed in 2024? Is it crashing in slow motion due to rarity in sales created by creating a less obvious trend line? If superhero movies tank in 2025, will collectors/investors shift more to Golden Age as a safer investment? Okay, so I'll kind of answer that in a weird way by sort of summarizing 2024. So what I saw with the general market, I mean, we're talking back issues market, not like I had this, somebody got mad at me when I was talking about the market and I'm talking about back issues, and they said, well, you're not talking about the comics that are currently coming out. And I'm like, okay, I'm a collector. I don't care about the current market. But yeah, so I'm talking about back issues, anything that's like more than a few weeks old. Okay. And with that, the back issues, what I noticed was silver to modern books. What we saw in 2024 was, okay, so 2023 was like major drop, like just people falling off a cliff. That was 2023. 2024 was this kind of slow motion crash. There was still a crash happening. And what was happening was, it's sort of the fine tuning, I would say, where things kind of found the floor and were kind of bouncing on the floor and bouncing under the floor, bouncing around that thing and trying to find where do they want to rest at. It's kind of like watching, you take a ball, you drop it off a wall, and it bounces on the ground a few times, and gradually each bounce gets a little bit lower, and eventually that ball stops, and it's now hit its real spot. Okay, it just sort of sits on the floor. Well, that's what happened with comics, that you kind of get this weird bouncing, and it kind of bounced until it got right to that where it's going to stop. And that was really 2024 in a nutshell. That was the whole year where we're getting this kind of, look like, oh, maybe it's going to recover. No, it's maybe going to keep on going down. Oh, maybe it's going to recover. And it was just kind of bouncing around that floor. Now with Golden Age, there was already a shift from modern and all this stuff that happened in 2023 all the way into 2024, where there was a shift. Now, there was a few things that happened in 2024 that I actually think will hurt the Golden Age in some ways. One of the things that happened was people were kind of letting go of books that they would normally not let go of. Maybe they're cash strapped or whatever. They were letting go of some kind of major books that you just don't see on the market for a while. And they were getting, as a result, either record sales or new highs because they hadn't sold for 7 years or whatever it is. So yeah, you'd have this sort of rise, but it wasn't a crash, and it wasn't a crash in any way. It was actually prices were going up. but people were letting go of some pretty major books. It was like, and as a result, we got now 2025. A lot of that market has sort of dried up for some of those more obscure things, where the people that did buy the books in that previous year are going to just hold on to them. They're just going to disappear again for another 7 years or whatever it is. You're just not going to see them again. So there was that buying opportunity that kind of brought in some of these more serious collectors. They're the more committed collectors. These are collectors that are collecting Golden Age. They're not the fly by night buyers that you see in the more modern ages. Golden Age collectors are more stable in what they're doing. They're committed to this hobby. It just is the way it is. Golden Age collectors, they don't really care what's going on in the market. They just want certain books. It is what it is. So what happens though is now we're into 2025. There's still some books that you're not normally seeing. They're coming up. They're still there, but it's becoming more and more that we're not seeing those big books. And I think what's going to happen is there will be some price correction. So like, because as I said, 2024 was a bit of a boom for the Golden Age, where people hadn't seen those books for a while. They might have overpaid. And what you're going to see this year maybe is a little bit of a correction in some of them. We already saw corrections in some of the EC books. We saw some of the correction in, for example, titles like Ghost Stories or Ghost Comics. We saw some price correction in certain key books that got actually the COVID spike, that were Golden Age but got the COVID spike. They've since corrected. So there is kind of like a correction phase that's going to happen in the Golden Age. Now you're still going to have new records being set, but there will be a bit of a correction, I feel, for the Golden Age this year. So whether I'm right about that or wrong about that, it's hard to say, because I think right now the overall market is so weak that based on my own correction, like my prediction of the future, like where I was saying, I think the market is going to be strong at the end of 2025, I should say, 2025. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be two shifts that will happen. One, as the market starts to recover in the other ages, it's going to pull some collectors out of the Golden Age into the more modern stuff. When I say more modern, I mean silver and beyond. But also a lot of the stuff that you saw that you never see in the Golden Age has dried up a little bit, so there's a little less to buy. It's just going to be less opportunities. So there's going to be a little bit of a shift based on those two things. So I think this year will be more of a good year for the more modernish books, and maybe not as maybe a bit of a correction / moderate year for Golden Age. That doesn't mean that the books are going to crash or burn or anything like that. I'm just saying that the Golden Age is going to be back to its more, I would say, more historical trend lines, which is slow and steady. So it'll probably go up, but not as much. It's not going to see the spikes that we saw in 2023 and 2024, where people were like, oh my God, the market is dying. Where do I go? I still like comics. And they went into the Golden Age. We're not going to see that as much this year, in my opinion. I think there will still be some big sales. Again, it's going to be books that if they come up, that they haven't come up for a while, you see a big sale. That's just sort of the way Golden Age is. But it's going to be more slow and steady, is my opinion. Now, with the movies, I'm sorry, it's such a long-winded answer. But with the movies, this is what I see. The movies, if they tank, that will actually negatively impact all comics. We're at sort of the last straw for comic collectors. And it's amazing how much the movie industry and even the TV and all that kind of stuff really impacts comics. A bad movie can kill a comic. I've seen it happen many a time where books that were actually popular and loved before the movie or even before the announcement of a movie, after the movie was so bad and so left a bad taste in the readers and the collector's mind that they didn't actually want to get those books anymore. They actually lost their interest in them. They were actually just dumping them. I think of Eternals 1 for the example of that. But and I actually put that as one of my specs. And so I think that does happen, right? So if right now we've had several years of bad movies. I mean, the problem is we went from having just amazing movies like Infinity War was just insanely awesome. And we had a bunch of really great movies to a bunch of really bad movies, just stinkers, just totally terrible. And we did that for many years where it's bad movie after bad movie and just things that were just insulting to the fans. If the movies of 2025 continue that trend, I think that you're at the last straw of what fans will tolerate. And they'll just say, okay, we've had enough superhero movies. What's another genre that we're interested in? What's something new that we can look at? And that's what'll happen. This is the last chance. I really do see this as the last chance for both DC and Marvel to produce something that's good. High hopes that they do a good job with these movies that they're doing, that they don't make it politically agenda orientated, that they keep it comics, they keep it focused on story. I really hope that they do a good job because I really do see collectors getting just annoyed. And investors follow suit. So it's collectors / investors will both go that way. So yeah, so something to be watchful for this year. I think that they learned the lesson. I actually saw it in a few of the movies towards the end of 2024 where I could tell that they had modified what they originally put in. It was too late. It was just so bad of a movie that they couldn't save it. But Marvel's being a good example of that with Captain Marvel and all those characters, Miss Marvel and all those ones. It was just such a bad movie that they couldn't save it even though they tried to tone it down. So yeah, so I think this year they have a chance. Will they do a good job? That's up to them. And I think the collectors and the fans and the readers of comics will embrace it and celebrate it if they do a good job. So it's really up to them. Hopefully they do a good job. Let's all pray for 2025 that this will be the year where they start making good movies again. So yeah, I hope that answers your questions. Thanks again for watching. If you have a question you would like answered for next week, I will answer it as I always do. Just put it in the comments below, and that's all you need to do, and I will answer it next week. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.